Exploring Britain's lost railways opens up a world of adventure.
Gotta love an old railway tunnel. Oh, this is spectacular.
As an engineer, I love the ambition and scale of the railway age.
Oh, beautiful.
And there are thousands around Britain who cherish its memory.
You missed the last train by about 85 years.
Now there are 8,000 miles of forgotten track to discover.
Wow, these are giant.
And every lost railway has its own story to tell.
It's wonderful.
This time, I'm following a lost railway that once ploughed straight through the charming Cotswolds.
Fantastic.
It was the backbone to an industrial Cotswolds we'd barely recognise today.
You'd leave me here all day, I'd be very happy.
It raised old industries to new heights.
And just look at this chimney.
And dragged this idyllic region into the age of steam.
Lovely.
The Cotswolds stretch across 5 counties, an area famed for its rolling hills, babbling brooks, and honey-coloured cottages. Up to 16 million visitors flock here every year. And who can blame them?
But there's another side to the story of the Cotswolds, and it's one that seldom gets told. In the mid-19th century, a railway was built straight through this celebrated countryside. And this now lost line offers a rare window into the rich industrial heritage of the Cotswolds.
The railway arrived here in 1887, some 3 decades after most of the country had already joined the expanding rail network. But building this route across just 46 miles took 3 different companies more than 30 years, until finally the Banbury and Cheltenham Direct Railway was finished. But direct was a relative term in a landscape riddled with engineering challenges. My journey begins in the famous spa town of Cheltenham. Long before my railway had even been planned, this was one of the country's most fashionable spots. As early as 1840, Cheltenham was already connected to the expanding network, thanks to the Birmingham and Gloucester Railway. Visitors came for the famous spring waters, reputed to have healing properties. As far back as the Regency period in the early 1800s, tourists helped the town grow rich, and its grand buildings let you know it.
Like this, the Royal Crescent here, which was originally built for visitors when they came to the famous spa town. And there are some classic features which define that Regency style. You've got the intricate, delicate wrought iron railings, the rounded windows atop the doors, and long, thin windows all around. It's a style I really quite enjoy, and you cannot escape it when you're walking around Cheltenham.
But even in Cheltenham's heyday, anyone who wanted to head east from here, across the wilds of the Cotswolds to Banbury, faced a 6-hour journey by horse. All that changed when, after decades of campaigning by locals, the Cotswolds finally got its own line. It's time for me to get on my walk. In the first of several nature reserves on my route, not far from where the station once stood, this old bridge over the line has become modern art. The line passed along the bottom of a dramatic escarpment, the Cotswold Edge. Stretching some 90 miles from Warwickshire to Wiltshire, in places the edge forms a line of cliffs. My railway didn't attempt to climb these. But incredibly, a much older prototype railway did. It operated some 900 feet above my line, here on Lechhampton Hill. It was built to carry a very special raw material, one that shaped the character of countless Cotswold villages and towns.
I'm no geologist, but I do know a little bit about this stuff. Limestone. I went to university in the city of Bath, which is only about 50 miles away from here. And just like Cheltenham, it's full of buildings made from this gorgeous limestone. If you could ever describe a stone as being gorgeous.
To find out more about this famous stone and how it made it off Lechhampton Hill, I'm meeting industrial archaeologist Dr. Ray Wilson.
So tell me a bit more about the geology and how this stone we see here is actually formed, or was actually formed.
It's what's known as a sedimentary rock, and we get limestones right the way down from Yorkshire, right the way down to Dorset. And these were formed in what has been described as a shallow subtropical sea that was actually covering quite a lot of the country over a long period of time. Because what we're looking at here were laid down about 160 million years ago in a 20 million year window. And we've got at least 120 feet of it here. So it's just amazing. But when you've got these conditions, you've got something that you could use millions of years later for fine building stone.
When were these quarries established? When were they operating?
Well, quarrying went on in the 16th, 17th, 18th century.
Here on Lechhampton Hill?
On Lechhampton Hill.
What kind of processes would have been used to extract this rock?
Oh, purely manual. So iron bars and wedges, knocking in wedges to bring it out.
Levering it out?
Pulling it out. No gunpowder, no black powder, that would have damaged the rock.
You can see that there's this block here that's almost ready to just be taken straight out.
Isn't it? Yes.
And it's lovely, look at it. Oh, it is, yeah, there's something very, very special about limestone.
As towns like Cheltenham grew, so did the need for stone. Getting it off this hill was no mean feat, but more than 200 years ago, the quarrymen came up with an ingenious solution.
They built these tramroads, and they would take thousands of tons off the hill in a little wagon that would trundle down the inclines, pulling up the empties. No motive power, purely gravity.
The tramroads ran for more than 2 miles down a terrifyingly steep incline and all the way into Cheltenham. But as the new railway appeared along the bottom of the hill in 1881, attentions turned further into the Cotswolds and to a wealth of local stone that might now be accessible. Work here petered out, and the new trains ran past without stopping.
But I guess in a way it's quite nice to see that. It's nice that it never got fully industrialised, because it leaves us with these beautiful faces, which shows off the Cotswold stone in its natural state before it's been often been turned into the lovely architecture. I could walk around this quarry for a long, long time, Ray.
Today, Lechhampton Hill is a fabulous spot to look back over Cheltenham, the town where so much local stone was taken.
Oh, yes. That is some view there.
But for the engineers who built my railway, these beautiful rolling Cotswold hills would present some serious headaches.
In less than 50 miles, this line would stride across 2 giant viaducts. It would snake its way through dozens of tunnels. It would cross 7 rivers and rise above 600 feet 3 times. And that meant that track had been laid on higher ground than any other mainline railway in England at the time. The engineering challenge of building this line was undoubtedly monumental.
Not that you'd know it, back here down in the valley. The old railway is saving its surprises until we get further into the Cotswolds.
I'm only a little way along my lost line from Lechhampton, and it's fairly flat here. You can see that on the map around Cheltenham, the land is low-lying. This is now a nature reserve, and it's blissfully tranquil down here. But things are about to get a lot more dramatic, and these contours along the map tell you everything you need to know.
The Cotswolds are a famously hilly place. Covering almost 800 square miles, today they're designated as the largest area of outstanding natural beauty in Britain. But for nearly 80 years, the Banbury and Cheltenham Direct Railway ploughed its way across this rolling landscape. More surprising is how much industry existed here before my railway arrived. 200 years ago, on just this stretch near Cheltenham, there were at least 20 quarries, all supplying that distinctive honey-coloured limestone to local communities. When the railway network started to grow, the beauty of Cotswold stone could be taken further afield. My next stop continues to be busy, long after the railway's gone.
This is modern quarrying here.
We've got different horsepower today. It makes the whole process a lot easier.
These days, up to 6,000 tonnes of Cotswold stone is extracted from Sireford Quarry every year, but sent around the country by road. It's used in some of the most famous buildings in Britain.
Cotswold stone is very fine-grained material, which means you can do a lot of carving work, intricate work, and it holds together well when you're doing historic restoration.
What kind of National Historic buildings are we talking about?
St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, Hampton Court Palace. We're doing a lot of work at Eton College.
Stone from Sireford Quarry at all of those buildings? Wow.
Backstage, Matt's team turned blocks of stone into beautiful architectural features that wouldn't look out of place in the railway age. The same can't be said for the tools they're using. This automated saw is programmed with complex designs and then left to get on with it.
Because how much time would a stone like that have taken prior to something like this coming in?
Probably we're talking a day and a half.
Whereas this will knock that out in?
About an hour and a half. So probably about 5 times the speed. As soon as you add a curve to it, you're talking about 20 times the speed you could do something on this as opposed to handwork.
Fantastic. Oh, wow, yes, 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 yes.
That's the finished product.
Oh, it's lovely. It's lovely. It's really, really clever stuff.
The machines definitely pull their weight, but when it comes to the most delicate work, masons like John still have the upper hand.
The precision on that is absolutely outstanding. And look how ornate it's been carved down. This is absolutely where the value is added to the stone here.
This piece is destined for America to be used in a grand new house. The masons here are all master craftsmen with years of experience.
All right.
But they're happy to let a complete novice have a go.
I mean, okay. Right, I can't ruin this.
You can't, well, you could, but...
Whoa. You get quite a lot of feel from it. It doesn't rebound away as much as I thought because it's quite soft.
You could pretty much work it without chisels. You could rub it down with rubbing blocks or rasps or things like that.
You could leave me here all day, I'd be very happy.
Beautiful as this landscape is, Centuries of stone quarrying has definitely left its mark on the Cotswolds, as has my lost railway line.
Ooh, that's a pretty big drop down there. That's at least 100 foot. Hang on. Yeah. That's 50 feet or so on that side. I hadn't realised because all these trees are around, but I'm actually on fairly sizable embankment built up for the railway here.
To cross this undulating terrain, the engineers had to level the ground. Where they met a deep valley, they brought in hundreds of thousands of tons of rock and earth to raise the level of the line. But a few hundred yards later, the challenge was the complete opposite.
And now look, I'm buried a good 50 feet down in this cutting.
Wherever the railway hit a hill, small armies were employed to literally cut a path through the rock. One cutting required 2,000 men, 120 horses, and 7 steam engines.
I guess thinking about the railway arriving in the Cotswolds, it would have changed everything. Before this was here, it would have been really tough moving around on horse and carts, on unreliable, bumpy roads. And then the railway came and suddenly it opened up all of this. And it opened it up to Victorian tourists who were keen to explore the country with this new technology of the train.
This railway was first and foremost an industrial line. But by carrying passengers as well as freight, it played a huge role in changing how the whole country views the Cotswolds. And if anywhere was going to persuade visitors of the charm of this region, it was my next stop.
This is Bourton-on-the-Water. And even before the railway arrived in 1862, this had already developed into a small tourist resort. Then people arrived by horse and cart, drawn in by this beautiful, idyllic setting.
With 5 Cotswold stone bridges crossing the River Windrush as it meanders through the village, one Victorian guidebook went so far as to call this the Venice of the Cotswolds. But it was the arrival of my railway that would really put Bourton-on-the-Water on the map. Suddenly, it was no longer an isolated rural backwater. Now, people could come here from anywhere that had a railway. And enterprising locals built hotels by the station and offered daily walking tours into the surrounding countryside. Even today, 60 years after my line closed to passengers, this village attracts 300,000 visitors a year and remains the picture postcard pin-up of the Cotswolds.
And on a gorgeous hot summer's day like today, before I get going again, it feels like I deserve just to take a minute, cool off the feet and enjoy everyone having fun around me here. You can see why people flock to this part of the country.
Suitably rested, it's time for me to get back on my walk. The next stop on the railway line was another gem of a town, Stow-on-the-Wold. But there was a problem. Stow's station was nowhere near Stow. As with many of the Cotswolds' finest towns, Stow was built on the highest land in the area. So I've made a detour from my railway line.
And what with trains not being great at going up or downhill, the station for Stow was built about a mile or so out of town towards the bottom of this hill. To make my way into town, I'm making use of an even more ancient piece of infrastructure. One of the most famous thoroughfares from Roman Britain, the Fosse Way. It's not actually that straight.
The Romans left their mark all over the Cotswolds. Their Fosse Way is still the main road through the area. Today, we know it as the less romantic A429. Once in Stow, there are reminders everywhere that this whole area owes a great debt to an industry the Romans ignited. For at least 300 years, the town held a market almost exclusively dealing in sheep. Locals believe these winding alleyways were built especially narrow so traders could funnel and count up to 20,000 sheep on market day. And there's an old saying that goes, in Europe, the best wool is English, and in England, the best wool is Cotswold.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Rob.
How are we going?
All right.
Am I right to come in through here?
Yeah, I could do with a hand.
Local man Steve Parks is a leading breeder of what's known around here as the Cotswold Lion.
These are pedigree Cotswold
These
sheep,
are
aren't they,
pedigree
Steve?
Cotswolds, and they originate from what the Romans brought 2,000 years ago and sailed them all the way from North Africa.
That was the beginning of this breed here?
That was the beginning of this breed. But they realised that, having gone to all that trouble, they'd have to put them in some protection at night, and in those days they called them cots. And it became known as the area in England where they kept the sheep in cots on Wolding Hills, hence the name of the Cotswolds.
That's where it comes from?
That's where the name comes from, yeah.
From how the Romans kept their sheep?
In cots, yeah.
So even the name of this region is rooted in Roman industry. The great peak of that wool trade was some 700 years ago, when it generated half of Britain's income and made the Cotswolds wealthy.
Churches, the manor houses.
That's it, isn't it?
The wonderful villages. They were, you know, all these estates were built purely and simply on the connection of the wool.
That's the draw for people nowadays to come and visit the Cotswolds, is to come and see all of that, which is a whole new industry.
And it's the honeycomb houses and the honey-coloured sheep.
There's quite a nice synchronicity with that, isn't there?
Isn't there just? Yeah.
I have a feeling there'll be plenty more distinctive Cotswold villages to come as I continue my journey eastwards. The Banbury and Cheltenham Direct Railway was built piecemeal, eventually winding, tunnelling and climbing its way across the region. But by the early 1960s, it was all gone. So as I reach the halfway point of my walk, it's nice to cross paths with a line that's very much still in use, here at Kingham Station. This line is a vital connection from London to Oxford and on through Kingham.
Every Friday evening, this place is awash with commuters and second homeowners pouring out of London to join their rural abodes. You've got to think that the Cotswolds we know today would probably be a very different place if they decided to close this line.
But Kingham was important to my line too.
Because 100 yards or so up there is where my lost line used to cross this busy main line. And this spot, Kingham, was pretty much the epicentre of my old route.
In fact, this is where it all began for my railway. Because the section leading east from here was the first to be completed. And that's where I'm heading now. In the early days, Kingham Station wasn't Kingham Station. It was originally called Chipping Norton Junction. And that name is a big clue as to my next stop, 5 miles along the line. In this town, you might bump into Jeremy Clarkson, David Cameron, or newbie members of the Chipping Norton set, the Beckhams. But 150 years ago, the most famous resident was the man who not only helped get my railway built, but, just outside the town, went on to erect one of the most extraordinary buildings in Britain. William Bliss inherited from his father a tweed business which used Cotswold wool. But William wasn't interested in the old way of doing things. He set out to drag the ancient wool industry into the new age of steam. And by golly, did he manage that.
The first stretch of this line, built in 1855, owes its existence to William Bliss. His humble tweed business here boomed because the railway allowed him to transport supplies in and finished goods back out, both efficiently and in vast quantities. And by 1872, he'd made so much profit, he was able to build this enormous, imposing, extravagant mill that when you're walking by, you cannot help but stop and gaze at in pure wonder.
With its dome and turrets, Bliss's mill looks like a country house on steroids. But a mill it was, churning out high-quality tweed cloth. And with the railway to support it, the company's turnover increased 25-fold. As mayor of Chipping Norton, Bliss had campaigned hard to get the line brought to the town. And he made full use of it by building railway sidings to his mill's back door.
And those sidings came right up here, bringing in coal to fire that massive furnace inside, which could be offloaded directly into the bunkers beneath me. And similarly, the finished high-quality textiles was loaded back into wagons and taken out to be exported around the country.
In its heyday, around 700 mill workers were weaving tweed cloth over 5 floors, using the latest steam-powered looms.
We continue to go up and up. Just look at this. This is the chimney, that prominent chimney that you see outside, and it's almost 250 feet tall. This was a structure built to make a statement here in the Cotswolds landscape.
The mill's looms have long gone. In fact, these days, the entire building has been turned into some rather swanky flats.
There he is.
Rob, come away in.
Thank you very much, Gordon.
You didn't come by train then?
Sadly not. The service isn't so great these days.
Come away in.
Gordon Moultrie has lived in Bliss Mill for 7 years.
Oh, hello.
Beautiful, isn't it? It's stunning.
It's not a hidden industrial heritage in this building at all, is it?
No. For a building that's 150 years old, it's actually alive. All this steel and these brick panels were fabricated off-site somewhere in the north of England, and they were brought down here by train because that was the thing at the time. And this whole building was put together like a mechano set in under a year. I mean, just think, trying to build this kind of building now in a year. Couldn't do it.
No way.
And yet the building is here and it'll be here for another 150 years.
Fantastic.
There's no getting away from this building's past, even when you're doing the washing up.
Isn't that fantastic?
That is quite spectacular. God, I can't even really see the top. I'd have to get down on the floor. There can't be many kitchens with views like that in the country.
Can you imagine it, having breakfast every morning and looking at the chimney?
His legacy stands.
Absolutely. And I live with it every day. Thank you, William Bliss.
This will stay not only in my mind, but probably also in my vision for a fair way as I continue along the railway line.
What a monument this place is to Victorian industry, to Cotswold wool, and to my railway. The line continues northeast from Chipping Norton towards another Norton. It's an Old English word meaning northern settlement. And my next stop, Hook Norton, is pretty far north in Cotswold terms.
The Cotswolds today is designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty. And strictly speaking, I've just left it. Historically, the Cotswolds was a broader, looser term without any strict boundaries. But whatever the formalities, the terrain for the railway didn't get any easier.
This next stretch was by far the most complicated to build. In fact, for a long time, the engineers had no intention of coming this way at all. Construction was already underway elsewhere when there was a last-minute change of plan. The route through relatively simple terrain was abandoned. Instead, they diverted to Hook Norton, which meant negotiating a minefield of hills and valleys. That diversion would take 14 long years to build, because cuttings and embankments weren't enough to get across this terrain. Instead, 2 tunnels were bored through more than half a mile of solid limestone.
And this tunnel here was the first of them. Now, quite clearly, I can't get through there now.
But once I've found another way round, some even more impressive engineering should be lurking. Somewhere.
Ta-da! This is what I was after. This is a viaduct that leads over to Hook Norton. I wasn't actually sure what condition this viaduct was in nowadays, but that probably tells me enough. I'm not going to be going any further across this viaduct because that deck has completely disappeared by the looks of it. Although I can just about make out through the trees there what looks like the next pier or pillar for the viaduct.
This was the first of 2 huge viaducts in this section. They took 400 men 4 years to complete. Locals joked that these viaducts were Oxfordshire's answer to the pyramids. No wonder. The tallest pier contains around 2,000 stone blocks.
Oh yeah, fantastic. Wow, these are giant. You can see there are, it's got 7 piers along its length. But what you can't tell on this photo, because it's in black and white, but I can, now that I'm up closer to it here, is the colour of this stone. This is not the honey gold Cotswold limestone that we saw further up the line. This is a little different.
The reddish tint is a giveaway that this stone contains iron. Of course, it was known as Ironstone. But although the stone was useful in building the railway, it was the iron itself that drew my line here on its epic diversion. Iron was the lifeblood of the steam age. It's found in naturally occurring seams of iron ore.
There we go, look, here's a good one, look. Nice all around here.
It doesn't look like much, but don't be deceived.
And in the 19th century, discovering that was like striking gold.
For the Banbury and Cheltenham Direct Railway, this was a brand new Cotswold industry. The fields around Hook Norton became a huge industrial landscape. You'd struggle to believe it now.
Hey, Martin.
Hello, Rob.
So I'm meeting railway historian Martin Quatermain, an expert in the ironworks of Hook Norton.
The only real marker I've got is the piers.
Yes, correct.
But in the foreground, what have we got here, Martin?
We have the Earl of Dudley's Ironworks. The whole area, as you can see, was really industrial going back 100 years.
With easy access to the station.
Correct. We're actually stood on the sidings which came off of the main line now.
Oh, we really?
Yes.
So there were other ironworks around here?
As far as you can see.
Along the railway?
As far as you can see was virtually ironworks, yeah. They're burning, in effect, all the waste off and moisture before it was brought up this bank by cable and tipped into standard gauge wagons and taken, in this case, to Round Oak Steelworks.
Along my lost line.
Along your lost line.
The iron ore here on the Earl of Dudley's land was mined dry within 15 years. So they stepped up production at the neighbouring works, especially during the First World War, where munitions factories needed huge quantities of raw metal. At one point, 5,000 tonnes of ironstone was being processed every week, and the railway was busy moving it on 16 freight trains a day. By the end of the Second World War, the best of the ore had gone, and the last of the Hook Norton ironworks was closed. In a sign of changing times, when the viaducts were eventually pulled down, the iron track beds were sold for scrap.
Look at this photo here now. There's so much activity going on here with the station, the viaducts, all this smoke and steam coming out from the ironworks. But then, look at that.
It's really hard to believe, isn't it? It's completely turned back to Mother Nature. She's reclaimed her territory.
She has, and she's done a good job of it.
She has, yes. Yeah.
Long before industrial Britain rushed to extract the iron itself, locals here had been building their villages of the local stone. And with the reddy orange hue of its buildings, my next stop is an Ironstone classic. Just over 30 miles from Cheltenham, my lost line and I have reached Hook Norton. This little village had been quietly minding its own business for well over 1,000 years, when the Banbury and Cheltenham Direct Railway arrived in 1887. I'm on my way to a village enterprise that flourished thanks to the new line. In fact, it's turned Hook Norton into a much-loved name.
The locals here believe that Hook Norton has 3 places of worship. There's the church and the chapel, and then there's this place, Hook Norton's Cathedral of Beer.
This is Hook Norton's magnificent brewery. It's by far the biggest ironstone building in the village. It was enlarged into what we see today just 3 years after the railway arrived, mainly on the back of selling so much beer to hundreds of thirsty railway workers. Brewer Jamie O'Sullivan is going to give me a taste of the place.
Jamie, this tower is some landmark on the horizon around here. I mean, you can see it for a little way coming in on the railway down there.
The brewery won't be as big as you see it today without that railway. Previously, it was quite a small setup. And then when the railway came through, it brought all the ironstones used to build the actual building.
Which is gorgeous as well, by the way.
Yeah, it looks great. And also allowed us to send beer further afield and become a national brewer. We've got beer going to Australia regularly. We've got beer going all over the country. So it goes far and wide, and it probably wouldn't have been like that without the railway.
Listen carefully, and you'll hear there's actually one steam engine still at work.
Oh, yeah. Lovely. Just going to enjoy that for a minute, actually, Jamie, because that is just gorgeous to watch spin and...
This glorious 120-year-old steam engine once pumped water all the way to the top of the tower.
How many flights are we?
I don't even like to think about it. Yeah, your step count goes through the roof.
I bet it does.
With the exception of electricity replacing steam, there are no modern luxuries here. The brewery relies on Victorian engineering and the skill of the brewers.
So this is the copper house, and this is where we'll add the hops, which back in the day would have come on the railway, 100-kilo bags, fresh from the fields. Temperature's currently 98, so probably put the hops in.
Is it time for the hops?
I think so.
All right, I'll give you a hand.
In a single day, Jamie's team can brew up to 30,000 pints. And on the next floor down, a batch they made earlier is coming along nicely.
Oh, yeah. That hits you when you come in, Jamie. There's Oh, lovely aroma in here.
Yeah, well, this is the fermentation room.
The only thing left now is to rouse the beer, which to you and me means stirring it with a big stick.
Right, there you go.
Yeah? I'll
Yeah,
give it a good rousing?
Yeah, do your best.
Jeez. So this is just, what, kind of pushing air down into the mix?
It is, yeah.
Oh, here we go. Don't mind
Yeah, it'll
that.
get you.
I don't mind that at all. What's not to enjoy? Beer, Victorian engineering.
With more than 50 employees, Hook Norton's 19th century brewery is flourishing. But the same can't be said for the Banbury and Cheltenham Direct Railway. The number of freight trains was already falling when, in 1958, a landslide between here and Chipping Norton blocked the line. It was never cleared. A few passenger and freight services limped on, but within a decade, the line was closed entirely. So Hook Norton's brewers have resorted to an older form of haulage.
Boy. This is Lucas, he's one of the shy horses here. And shy horses have been part of the process, transporting the beer all around before the railways came. And they still do a little bit of deliveries locally. But more than that, they're involved in a part of the quality control process. Apparently, they enjoy a drop. Let's have a look. What do you think, Luke? What do you think, Lucas? Do you want to go? Oh, yeah. I think he likes it. I've actually drunk with messier drinkers.
And with an endorsement as enthusiastic as that, who am I to resist?
Cheers. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
I've certainly found the Cotswolds to be beautiful. But I've discovered a remarkable tradition of industry here too, with the railway as its final chapter. My line also ushered in a new age of visitors who now rely on cars to get to all the Cotswolds' most celebrated spots. As the Lost Railway turns north towards its final destination in Banbury, it sweeps through the village of Adderbury, where I've been promised a rather lovely view.
Oh, yeah. Look at this. Every year, thousands upon thousands of tourists pour into the Cotswolds. And they come here for this, the tranquility, these alluring landscapes, possibly even the beer. And walking this lost railway, I've learnt that beyond its obvious beauty is a hidden past, an industrial history that gives the Cotswolds a fascinating extra layer. And for me, that just makes this whole area even more captivating.